Sometimes a crafting project jumps out at you and you can't help but to pounce on it. That's what happened with me this week. Let's dive into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This is the Storycraft Society, and this week I was shopping at Walmart, just kind of walking through the craft aisle, looking for anything that jumped out at me, and I found this little birdhouse. It was $1.24. Again, this is one of those things where it's like a lot of other projects that I've done here on the channel. I just knew that there was a little foam house in here, or a little substructure wood house in here that will be covered with foam. It will look like a little fantasy D&D building. I was excited to get crafting with this thing, and now that I have it, we will have an awesome looking D&D building out of $1.24 birdhouse. Let's go. All right, first thing is the game plan. So we're gonna pull this sticker off. Hopefully it comes off easy. It didn't come off easy. Oh well. Okay, so the first thing that I'm noticing is that this roof looks a little square, so I think what I want to do is get a little bit of a fantasy kind of bend to it. I also know that I'm going to want to put a chimney in or on here somewhere. I think probably the easiest place would be is to put it on the back. I'm not sure yet. I obviously have to get these little pegs off, and then probably I need to fill these holes. So that is the first few steps. So with all of that stuff done, it's now time for me to figure out what the vision for this thing is. And I think it's kind of simple, right? Like, I think there's like a door down here. If you like split it like this and then do like windows and then like a window up here maybe, and then maybe nothing on the sides. I don't know about the back, although I do want the chimney. So maybe the chimney goes on here next. As a real quick aside, I just cut this strip of XPS foam, and that's gonna end up being my chimney. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna actually just set in here like this. I'm gonna end up notching it out up here so that it fits in there, but it'll kind of have this fantasy lean to it, and I think that's actually going to end up looking really great. Okay, so here is where we are so far. I have some timbers on. I put some blocks on to show off the corners of the brick part of the lower building. Obviously, I have my substructure for my chimney. I've marked in where my door is going to be, and I've marked in where my windows are going to go. One's going to go there and one's going to go there. One more quick side note for those who care. These larger timbers are 1/4 inch. These little timbers are 3/16 of an inch. I'm going to end up making the planking up here also be the 3/16 of an inch. These little floor joists are actually only 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. Now I need to move on to the next step. So the next two things that I'm going to do are, first, I'm going to make strips of XPS foam that are textured to look like wood, specifically wood planking, and I'm going to put that all over the upper stories, so on and so forth, the whole way around the top. Then I will lay all of my decorative timber pieces on top of those. It'll make it easier than trying to lay these all as individual planks. And then the other thing that I decided that I want to do is, because of the shape of the house is a little bit predictable, I'm going to add over on this side here a little piece that fits on that will look like a little roof that comes out. And then I'm going to put a little bay window into it, and then when you're looking straight on at the piece, there will be this little bay window piece that sticks out on this side that kind of breaks up the front silhouette of the build. When I get all that stuff done, then I will check back in. While we are looking at what I've gotten done so far on the timbers on this build, I just want to take that second to talk about how awesome this stage of the process is. And for me, I just get so excited at this particular moment. It's also worth mentioning, this is where a lot of my builds go to die because everything kind of gets worse after this moment, right? I can see the transformative bit of where the build is going. It doesn't look like a little birdhouse anymore. It looks like a tabletop house. But then now what follows this transformation is getting to all of the nitty-gritty little details and filling them all in. Speaking of nitty-gritty details and filling them all in, the next thing that I need to do is my bricking. So I want to talk about my favorite way to do bricking so that it feels quicker than it sometimes does, I guess. So what I do is I take and use hot glue to glue down a base layer of bricks across the bottom of all of the areas where I'm going to have block. Then once I do that, then I use PVA glue, in this case I'm using Eileen's tacky glue, to go across all of the areas that are then open and still exposed. Now the PVA glue takes a little bit of extra time to dry, but that's okay because I already have all of the pieces up and tacky glue holds those bricks in place super well. The laying process also goes way faster with PVA glue than it does with hot glue, but you get the benefit of that bumper track of bricks that are already hot glued in place. They are rigid, they are sturdy, they're not going to go anywhere, so you don't have to worry about them shifting on you. I'm going to continue knocking that out. I need to get all the bricking done on the chimney, and then I will check back in. So the next step after doing all of the brickwork, which turned out fantastic by the way, is going to be working on the roof. I have one little bit of an issue going into this section, which is that the roof itself is a little too square. That's going to be the main problem that I have with this little project the whole way through. Everything is made on the original birdhouse to be very square and angular, and I'm going to try to break that up as much as possible. Now, the way that I'm going to try to do this is by adding a strip of foam along the fascia parts of the roof, and then that's going to allow me to add some thickness to it that I lost because of the foam that, obviously made this section be a little bit thicker. But also, it's going to allow me to change and ebb and flow how thick this line is. I realize that this is sounding out of my mouth way more complicated than I think it's going to be in application, so I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and knock one of these out so then I can actually show you on camera what I did. It's not going to be that complicated, so 1 second. All right, hopefully now I will visually be able to make this make more sense than just me babbling about it. So what I did was I had the strips of fascia board here. I added these pieces onto the front and back. And what I did with those is I tapered those so that they started thin up at the top, about 1/8 of an inch, and then came out to about 1/4 inch down at the bottom. Then to cover up that transition, I put this thin strip on the end there. So that looks like a board running that direction, but it also gets me this big slant. I think that's a little bit easier to see. It starts thin up at the top and gets a little wider, and it breaks up that angularness of the roof. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out on this side, which doesn't have it yet, and then I'll show you what that's like when it's done. With the last of the shingling all done, that is going to finish up the majority of the sculpt, with the exception of a few things that I did. I put this big beam cap on. I just flattened off the top of it and hot glued that on there, which is great. I did add all of these nail holes here. Let me grab another build real quick. On a lot of builds, I end up having these kind of support pieces that are holding up the roof. I just realized a little too late that I forgot those on this build. So to imply them, I just drove nail holes in on these pieces here, and then that implies something that's running horizontally across there. And then to keep those kind of across the feel of the piece, I added them in a couple of select areas that I thought could use them. The last thing that I have to do before I get to painting this thing is the door. And I think I'm gonna try something new this time. Normally what I do is I put my foam in there and then I paint it up with the rest of the piece and do all that stuff the same way. Well, with miniature painters, they will paint a certain part of the model separately because it's easier to reach that piece that way. So I'm gonna try that this time. I cut out a piece of foam that is the exact size of my door there. And what I'm gonna do is work on this to get it so that it is my door. I can paint it up separately, and then I will just cut it off of here with my hot wire tool and just whoop, glue it in when it's done. And that will be that. So we'll start working on this. First things first, I'm going to get out my X-Acto knife and I'm gonna cut my planks into the door. Then I'm gonna break out my pencil and I'm gonna widen all of those lines. Next is gonna be my Next is gonna be my wire brush. I gotta go grab that. I'm gonna be using this brass one here. And I'm going to scratch in all of my wood texture. So there, that's looking like that. That's cool. I'm gonna re-go over these lines just to make them nice and defined. Now the next thing is going to be the bracing. So I'm going to do that by pulling out some of the planks that I was using for shingling, and that's gonna be what I use to make these cross braces with. I think this is gonna be the top of the door. So I'm actually going to put a T up here to remind myself so I don't forget. And then I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna cut it in half because it's not quite the scale that I like. And then that is just gonna get glued on there like that. With those on there, the next thing that I know is that my door handle is gonna go over here somewhere. I'm just gonna put a dot there so it reminds me where it's gonna be. But that means that the door is gonna swing like this. And one of my favorite things actually about having this channel is getting to interact with all of you. And someone posted a comment on my recent huge build video. I'll put the thumbnail of the video up here, but someone posted that the door bracing that I did was wrong. I put the bracing like this if the door opens this direction. And what they pointed out was the whole point of that cross brace is that it's supposed to go like this so that as gravity pulls on this part of the door, that cross brace fights it. And I did not know that. So what I'm gonna do is now put a cross brace in on this door in the right way that it goes, and then I can move onto the door handle. Also, I cannot remember names to save my life, but for the person who gave me that tip, thank you. I wouldn't have known it if it wasn't for you sharing that. So we all grow together. Let's go. With the door bracing on there the correct way, the next thing that I need to do is get the door handle figured out. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do with that yet. I think what I'll do is my typical fantasy doorknob, and the way that I'm going to do that is by getting out a little silver jewelry loop, one of these, and then I got a little bit of string, and then I'm going to pull out Eileen's tacky glue. I'm gonna get that tacky glue on the string. Doesn't have to be a lot of it, because there's actually not going to be very much string used, but take that and I twist that into the fibers of the string. I thread the string. I try to thread the string, and then I take that and then I just twist it so that it is on there like that. Twist, 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 twist. I'm gonna set this off to the side and let that dry. That didn't take hardly any time at all to dry. And so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and clip that end of it. And what that's gonna do is leave me that little bit there. That is gonna be the lead in that goes into the hole of my door. I'm gonna clean up those little frays real quick. And then it'll set in there like that. But now what we need is glue. Dunk that into the glue. That goes back in there. And then the only other thing that I'm going to do is take a paintbrush Grab just a little bit of that glue and get that down underneath this part of the ring so that that will hold it in down on the bottom there as well. But that's going to be it for sculpting up the door. With the sculpt all finished, the only thing left for me to do was paint this thing up. And I didn't do anything crazy with this, so I didn't document the process. If you are curious as to how I painted this thing up, I encourage you to check out my Lazy Crafter's Guide to Painting Terrain. I go over everything that I did in this video, with the exception of I painted the roof in a red color. All I did was use a super watered down wine as my base coat, then I used a cherry red as my midtone, and then a burnt orange as my highlight dry brush over the top. And that was very, very simple to do. In fact, in that Lazy Crafter's Guide to Painting Terrain, if you just replace the brown colors that I use for the wood texture with those, you'll end up with this exact same result. But the only thing I had left to do was cut the door off of its little piece of XPS foam and glue that in place, and I was done. I love projects like this. Gosh, I feel like I say this every single video, but this might be my favorite type of project to do because I found this little birdhouse, which is basically nothing. I paid $1 for it and then ended up with a cool piece of terrain that I don't think I would have built otherwise. There is just nothing more that you can ask for than that when it comes to crafting terrain. But that's it for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, you can support the channel in a bunch of ways. First and foremost, you can subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Number two, you can share this video with a friend that you think would enjoy it. That's the #1 way that you can help out a small YouTube channel. Third, you can like this video. You can leave a comment down below. We do have merch. I don't push it a lot, but we have merch and I have those both linked in the description as well if you would like to support the channel financially. But with that said, that's it. Thank you so much for the luxury of your attention and your time. And until next week, I'll be seeing you. Birdhouses into D&D houses? That's that stuff that I like. This is awesome. Turned out so well.